we look at the disabled body as if it is not whole. We have been taught to look at this as an issue rather than an opportunity. There's a massive opportunity, and it's the right thing to do.
Well, everybody, welcome back to this edition of the Multifamily Mind. I'm Steve Wunsch, your host, and I am beyond thrilled for this guest. I've had her on my list since we visualized this, conceptualized this podcast way back in January. I'm pleased to have Alycia Anderson joining me today. Alycia is an international TEDx motivational speaker, disability advocate, DEI and accessibility corporate inclusion educator, a former VP of a multifamily SaaS technology company, podcast host of Pushing Forward with Alycia, and founder and CEO of the Alycia Anderson Company, LLC. Alycia's company focuses on the education and advocacy of diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility in the workplace. She holds a European master's degree in adapted physical activity, emphasizing the benefits, practices, and principles of inclusion. She's a tennis player, cyclist, identical twin, and has been a wheelchair user since birth. In June 2024, Alycia was appointed to the Insurance Diversity Task Force commissioned by the California Department of Insurance under their Insurance Diversity Initiative. Alycia was awarded 2022 Employee Business Resource Group Program of the Year and 2024 Distinguishing Alumni Award from California State University, Chico. Alycia shares her journey globally to help companies and organizations understand the true benefits inherent to building a diverse, inclusive, and accessible workplace and society. Shining light on how our diversities are core to the qualities that make each of us uniquely qualified and able in life, Alycia's authenticity and charisma draw others to her, and she naturally connects with them to inspire, mentor, champion, and support. She right-sizes everyday obstacles to open minds to a world of possibility. And that's how she rolls. Alycia, I'm so excited to have you here, girl.
Woo! I gave you the long version of that bio. Everybody knows.
Feel free to share the short one anytime.
Nothing else to talk about.
I love it. I think it's important that people know how qualified you are and all the great things that you've accomplished in such a short time. I'm privileged to have had the opportunity to work with you at that SaaS company. So just thrilled to have you here today.
I'm so thrilled to be here today. And I'm privileged to have you in my life. I feel like looking back in the rearview mirror, you and I sat on a lot of calls for a long time with me just saying, all they want to do is be a speaker. And you encouraged me every step of the way. And here I am.
Remember that little idiom that I shared with you? What did it say?
I do. Push fear aside. Am I saying that right?
Close. Everything you want is on the other side of fear.
Everything you want is on the other side of fear. And that is excellent advice for anyone.
I can't take credit for it. But yeah, I mean, amazing to see how you have not only overcome, the fears that were kind of blocking your ability to just kind of create your own path and blaze forward, but how much of a positive influence you've had in this world. I mean, you're on the global stage, started with TEDx in Tahoe. I was there for your first TEDx talk, was so honored to be a part of that audience. Would love it if you could just share some of your story with the folks listening today, just so that they kind of have a context into kind of your life, how you grew up, and in kind of what's brought you to where you are today.
I identify as disabled, a disabled woman with a capital D, very empowered with it in my state that I am today, but that took some time to accomplish throughout my life. But yeah, I was born with my disabilities called sacral agenesis, which is basically underdevelopment of my spinal cord at the sacrum, sprinkled with a good amount of non-apparent internal disabilities. And I think that intersection of disability is really important for anyone listening to understand that whether there's an apparent disability going on or not, we don't know what is actually happening on the inside of each one of us. And that piece of my disability has been the hardest part of my disability, just major reconstruction and lots of maintenance and tons of surgeries. But I often say, to your theme, pushing through fear, when you have to overcome things like that in your life over and over and over and over again, kind of to have the rite of passage into tomorrow, you push through fear, you get to the other side of it, and there really is magic and dreams come true on the other side if you can find the courage to push through some things. Even if you don't succeed, if what I found, just like that step or that push or that forward roll to it, really is important in just like confidence building. So anyway, I was born with my disability. It's been a lived experience my entire life. I was born in the mid 70s, so you can all guess how old I am, but I'm getting up there. And when I was born, we were still wanting to hide away what was considered inferior. And that was definitely me. I was born with a pretty rare disability. And back then it was thought that it wouldn't be a good lived experience to institutionalize her. She will not make it. She won't have a quality of life. She will not be a contributor in our society. And my parents from day one, I was born an identical twin to an able-bodied sister. And from day one, yeah, hey, Reg. She's a multifamily too, so I'm sure some people definitely know who she is. It was kind of no choice other than advocacy immediately to give me the opportunities, at least try to give me the opportunities that my sister had, no matter what. And this was before ADA, Rehabilitation Act was just passed, which meant that it was finally illegal to discriminate against disability, and some accessibility legislation was put into place, but the no's were acceptable still. So, it was a lot of advocacy to fight for me to be included in school, to be mainstreamed, and to go to brownies, to jump rope like my sister, to figure out how to have a life path. And, so it's been a lifelong journey of advocating for inclusion, finding ways to adapt to a world that frankly was not built for disabled people, and in many ways still is not today in a lot of scenarios. And how do you live the best life that you can while trying to make things better and expand opportunities for people with disabilities? And, back then, and again, even today, we look at the disabled body as if it is not whole. And a lot of the work that I'm doing is to kind of shift the lens in which we're seeing disability through, and understanding that disability is the largest marginalized group in the world. It has billions of dollars of buying power. It is absolutely part of the human being experience. And it is something that will touch everybody's life in some way. And because society has been kind of tuned into, we need to fix it before we accept it. It's been a battle. It's been a fight for people with any type of disability to find their space. And that's me included. So, I grew up like this, and navigated college and, my early career with a disability. And way back when, I tried to mask it as much as I could. I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to be the girl asking for accommodations. I made things so much harder for myself because I wanted to make other people comfortable. So I would be invited in or hired or included. And that was tough, pretty tough,
What I love about you, Alycia, is too that you kind of, through all of this, you've been able to maintain this really high level of, for lack of a better word, engagement and positivity. Because a lot of folks who may have found themselves in your situation fighting those fights and that uphill battle and, trying to push through doors that were constantly getting slammed in your face, you could have took the, woe is me and I'm a bitter, I took my bitter pill and the world can, suck it. You've maintained this positivity. And I think that, to your credit, is part of why people are so drawn to you and why you're able to, just inspire people on a level that others just can't quite get to, which I think is fabulous.
I appreciate you saying that. And it would be false to say that I'm not happy all the time, because I have lot of moments that are like, this sucks. Like, it's hard. But we all have those things. And I just decided, like, I only have one life. And I want to live it the way that I want to live it. I want to do and create and become what I want to become, not what society says is okay and acceptable for somebody who, in this case, is a wheelchair user. And, I had a secret weapon, which was my identical twin sister, to kind of follow. And she was kind of like my map, my guidepost. If she did it, I would do it. If she did it, I would do it. If she did it, I would do it. But it was vice versa too. Like, if I played wheelchair tennis, she would come. And so I think that whole process of learning how to include each other so organically, we're twins, so we're very codependent on each other. We still would climb into the womb and snuggle if we could. So, it was a lesson of life through love that, wasn't planned, but it was perfected. And that is what I bring to the stage today. Is my platform is called Heart of Inclusion, and it is very educational, but it's also like very human. It's very much, I am about love and empathy and trying to put my wheels in somebody else's shoes and understand that we all come from different backgrounds, and, communicating together is the way that we understand this beautiful, like, diversity of life that we are given. I appreciate you saying that I'm positive, and I know that piece is one of the pieces that is very palatable for me with my clients. And it means a lot to me, but I do have rough days. I'll tell you what, I definitely
we all do. We've had some early morning conversations before the coffee has kicked in.
Tears crying.
Hi, folks. I wanted to take a quick 30-second break so that I could say, I hope you're enjoying today's episode, which couldn't be brought to you without being superpowered by Sales Mail. Really, we couldn't produce this content without them. Sales Mail is the easiest and best tool for sending personalized video via email, text, and CRM. So, if you really are enjoying today's episode, it would mean a lot to me if you would visit salesmail.com so you can check out how our solutions might impact your business communications. And don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn as well. Okay, that's enough. Now back to the conversation. Well, listen, this conversation really, not that it's been long in coming. I've been anticipating it for a while, but, this month is especially important because October represents National Disability Employment Month. And so I really want to just kind of focus on, I'm going to have you back and we're going to talk about some other things that are part of your platform, like disabling ableism and, all the great things that you're doing on the national stage as well. But, for all intents and purposes for this episode, I really want to talk about, I remember seeing you speak at NAA, Apartmentalize, back in San Diego. I think it was probably 2021 or 2022. And in that conversation that you were having with the group, and it really was a conversation with us, some conversation began to happen around, employment and how do we create an inclusive employment environment where people can authentically be themselves 100%. I remember your story about, and I'd love for you to tell your story about Dimitri and the whole role in that SaaS organization and how that job came about because of who you are. And so let's kind of shift gears and kind of move down that path if we can this morning.
I have proudly grown into myself being a woman with a disability that can lead and get the job done. And I learned that in multifamily. And when I started in multifamily, I was a quiet, shy, disabled, young girl trying to grow into her career in an industry that frankly looks at disability as a compliance issue. Right. And I can say that now without fear. And when I started in multifamily, one of my very first experiences, I was excused out of a property because they had been sued for an ADA infraction, and they said they don't allow people in wheelchairs on their property. And I left that property and I cried, and I don't cry that much at work, but I cried because I felt like I don't belong here. I do not belong here. These people fear me. I never said that story. I worked directly in multifamily for almost 20 years. I never said that story out loud until I started becoming an advocate. And because I was so afraid that clients wouldn't buy from me, I wouldn't be invited in, I wouldn't be invited to team building. They're going to be afraid that I'm going to sue, like all these things, right? As I grew into my career and into my disability and into my identity and finding the power in the path instead of the limitations that society places on it because we don't understand it and there's not enough representation and we're not talking about it in the right ways, I had this opportunity to shift companies and grow into a larger role. And I was on the vendor side of the business. So I was in and out of so many environments, and I would mask. I would show up to properties and there would be steps going into the leasing office. And I was like, oh my God, I'm not going to tell anybody about this. Anybody looking. I'd get out of my chair. I'd pull it up the steps. I'd crawl back in my wheelchair, knock, knock, knock. The leasing agent would go like, oh my God, how did you get in here? And, oh, I got it. It's no problem, because I didn't want to be that person in our industry because of this experience that I had right when I started. And then I had the flip side of that. I had the most amazing, empowering experience when I went on my job interview at Knock. Mm-hmm. And the founder of the company interviewed me, and he showed up, and he didn't know I was going to be in a wheelchair because I would never tell hiring managers that I was in a wheelchair. I wouldn't show it on my LinkedIn, hide, because I knew I wouldn't get my wheel in the door to even have a conversation, because I was going after the sales jobs. I wanted to travel. I wanted to go to conferences. I wanted to go wine tasting. I wanted to do the whole thing that we get to do in multifamily. And it was the first time that a hiring person didn't flinch when he saw me, because there's always this moment, whether it's with hiring managers or with new clients that aren't expecting me to show up in a wheelchair, there's always like it might be nonverbal, split second, like, oh, he didn't do that. And so we have this great conversation. He ends up hiring me. And then one day we're driving around selling software to clients, and I start speaking on disability inclusion, employment, things, the stuff that I'm doing. And I say, Dimitri, I need some content. Like, why'd you hire me? You didn't know I was going to show up in a wheelchair. You didn't flinch. Like, that felt so good to me that like I was finally in front of leadership that didn't flinch because I was in front of him, Why'd you hire me? And he listed up things that were related to my education and my past career experience in multifamily. And then he said something that changed my life. He said that he knew I had to be a proficient planner, and that he knew that for me to do the same job as everybody else, that I need to plan, pre-plan, plan some more. And then he knew that proficiency around planning would translate to my work. And he not only saw beyond my disability, but he knew that it was core to the qualities of what makes me who I am, that made me more qualified over other applicants. That my disability was powerful, that it was leverageable. And that one moment changed my trajectory forever. And I tell that story almost every time I speak, because it's a powerful thing to lift our differences up as valuable, to leverage, to gain the career, to reach your dreams, to get the raise, and that's where we're starting to take these conversations. And as a disabled person who had never had that moment, it was transformational for me.
Yeah.
And that's a note to any leaders that are out there listening to this. Small conversations that are lifting your employees up to gain the confidence to lean into who they are and their power. Like, what an amazing privilege and opportunity that we can have as leaders for people that are coming up behind us. And that's what I hope to do now for the many 20-something, 30-something disabled people that are following me, that they tell me all the time that I'm their role model. It can make me cry.
Yeah.
The fact that I get to do that for people now is an absolute honor for me. So,
and leaders listening, looking at things through a different lens. Like Dimitri saw you, 100% you, and didn't see, he could have cared less what you rolled in on or walked in on, right? It was about what he saw in terms of the talent that I love that story. And if you ever stop sharing it, I will have words with you.
I don't think I ever will. Dimitri's always like, oh, you ended up leaving the company because of that.
But how cool for a leader to be able to shift his perspective on a situation. And sometimes it's not easy for us. Sometimes as leaders, it's hard for us to see past what we don't understand or what we've not lived through or been exposed to. I think about, there's so many different marginalized communities in the world today, transgender people and, all the different ethnicities and all the different walks of life, yours being, one of them. And, to be able to look at that with a different lens and what an impact that not only had on you, but your future, your family, and others who now look to you as that role model, which I think is such a really cool thing for you. And I'm just, you could cry, I could cry. I'm your number one fan, and I have been for such a long time. And I just love that you've got this platform now that's giving you the opportunities to share your voice. With National Disability Employment in our sites here for October, what are some things that you'd recommend, in that conversation at Apartmentalize? I remember Marcy French bringing up some conversation around, we've got a little checkbox on our application that says, do you require any kind of accommodation? And, so many people are fearful to check that box because, to your point, they're afraid that someone's not going to see past that request or past that, what some people would look at as a limitation. So let's talk about some practical things that you're now recommend. You're talking with companies like Victoria's Secret, Abercrombie and you're going to talk to Netflix in a week or so. What are some of the things that you're teaching those companies and recommending that they do differently to create that inclusive work opportunity for people, no matter what their situation?
I think it's always a good place to start in understanding the multitude of barriers that we're trying to overcome. And I think it's really easy to put the physical barriers in a box and say, we need to make sure that infrastructure and technology and equipment and all of that is accessible for every type of ability. But there's also attitude barriers, like misconceptions, false beliefs about the path. Right? Educating ourselves on and checking our own biases at the door and really looking deep on where our attitudes are driving our decisions. Policy barriers are super important to focus on. And it is a piece of the pie that, from a disabled perspective, is oftentimes left in the box of everybody, but understanding that programs, policies, education, benefits. I never once took insurance benefits from any employer because they were never good enough to help me live. Right? They were never good enough for the amount of medical care that I have to take. Having flexibility and thinking outside of the box in these policies and benefit packages to be more nimble, I think is, just reevaluating all of that is really important. And communication barriers too. Like, can everybody communicate the way that you do? No. So are we putting in place things for understanding complex communication problems, closed caption and like different technologies that help us actually communicate together? And then social barriers, which is very tied into multifamily when we're talking about limited housing and limited education on it. And how can we fix that in our industry? Like, we are building homes for people that are going to be disabled through aging, illness, and all kinds of other things. What if we start looking at properties instead of going, okay, we have X amount of units that are ADA
compliant.
But instead we're looking at every unit going, okay, maybe we need 3 things like higher toilets, a little bit wider doors, and, whatever else to make it more universal for when things happen, to, barrier-free entry, like doing that in development stage. So we're not always trying to like catch up and have this compliance issue. Right. So I think looking at the multitude of barriers that we're trying to overcome and understand that ADA is bare bone basics, like we have to start there, but that legislation needs to continue to advance in modern day. And does it all make sense and work anymore? No, we have to keep moving. It has to be fluid. Yeah. So companies need to embed these philosophies into the fabric of their organization. Like a Microsoft, they take accessibility and disability inclusion and embed it in every department. And HR learns about what they need to do much differently than technology team does. And the training and education department, they go through a different process than customer service would. And making it necessary and required for every department to understand how we start to shift into more of a universal, like inclusive philosophy.
And, it's to your point, it's more like one of your platforms I love is called Beyond Compliance. Mm-hmm. And that's that idea of, not just checking the box, but really being, can you share that statistic that you share about how many of us in our lifetime will either become disabled or will have an immediate member of our family who will become disabled? Because I think that's, that puts a really important context on how people need to be thinking about this.
Yeah, it's 1 in 4 of us in the United States. It's over 1 billion people worldwide. It's over 60 million people in our country. And that is a massive market share. It's a massive market share. Like, do you know how many conversations I'm having beyond compliance with companies, like the Targets or the this or the that we're working on products that are universal, accessible? The billions of dollars that are waiting there for people to start to look through a new lens and build products through a new lens that are not just for an able-bodied lived experience, because that lived experience is not a realistic experience as we move into our lives. We're going to break a leg. We're going to break a bone. Our eyes are going to go bad. We're going to use closed cap. It's just like, so this is a shift in lens. Mm-hmm. We've been taught to ignore. We have been taught to look at this as an issue rather than an opportunity. And the modern day, there's a massive opportunity and it's the right thing to do.
Right. 100%. 1,000%. And it's interesting too, because I think, going through what we went through with COVID and embracing some things that we were averse to in the past, like technology, just like this conversation we're having here virtually. I mean, there's been some eye-opening opportunities in that vernacular as well. We're able to do work differently because we had to. Let's do work differently because we want to, and really create that path forward for everyone and appreciate. I mean, how cool for Dimitri to look at you and say, I know that because of your situation, you have to really plan well. And what a great asset that planful mindset is for a team, whether you're a sales team, a customer service team, a leasing and service team on a property or an operational support team, upholding a multifamily company, to be able to see that planfulness that's required for you to live and be a functional piece of what we would call, society. What an asset, and what a great, I just can't say enough about how leaders, listen to that story and grab those glasses and put them on and look at the world in a different way than you did this morning.
Yeah. And understand that if you're not creating access to your company by way of your websites or your product or your buildings or all of it, it's a nonverbal communication to the marketplace that you don't sell to disabled people. You will sell to everybody else.
Yeah.
Besides disabled people, and it's a huge amount of human beings that still need homes and products and to live.
Doesn't feel very fair housing, does it?
It doesn't feel fair at all. And COVID is a perfect example that when COVID happened and we were all working from home, 70% of disabled people are not working. And those numbers went up astronomically during COVID because they could apply to jobs that wouldn't have taken them otherwise, because they could work from home in their own accessible environment with their own technology that allows them to function at the most optimal level. They didn't have to disclose if they don't want to, and there were so many freedoms for disabled people. I was actually on my podcast with an amazing woman, she's a therapist. And when people started to go back to work, she got depressed because she was like losing that. Finally, she had this commonality with the workforce, and then everybody started to go back. And so companies like having flexibility in the way you allow your employees to work. I had this really cool person on, his name is Jan Vishnopolsky, and he was on my podcast, and his parents literally developed the internet. He's like brilliant. He's neurodiverse and ADHD. He did not want to identify for a very long time. He starts building AI tools to use them for not only to develop them, but he uses them as accessibility tools, in that when he's leading his team, he will put information into AI to see how it translates, to see if the common mind will understand his high level stuff. Huh. Fascinating. These are the people that we're missing out on. Brilliant.
Yep.
Brilliant minds, because we're creating barriers of entry that don't do anyone any good. We all suffer from it.
Yeah. And to look at his situation as a disability, when in fact, what he has is an amazing ability. Yeah. It's all a mindset shift, and it's all the ability to be, like you said earlier, pliable, flexible, able to pivot, able to provide people, and I'm one of those people that I'll talk about stuff that a lot of people won't. Like, I had conversations with you about your journey and about your struggles. And, a lot of people don't want to go there because they don't know how to, first of all, have those conversations. And secondly, maybe they're afraid they're going to offend somebody. But for me, it was curiosity. It wasn't like me making a judgment call on you or your ability in any way. It was like, help me understand so that I can be a better support to you and what you're doing. And how much we learned about one another, and how many things we found that we had in common with one another. And we would have never had that opportunity if we didn't have those conversations. So I think too, one of the grassroots things that organizations can do is to start talking about stuff like this, and not keeping it, like we would lock away people in the 70s that were you. Good grief. What a terrible, terrible thing. And look at what we would have missed out on. So let's open those doors. Let's have those conversations, and let's keep moving. I love your pushing forward, your podcast. I mean, that's what it's all about. Let's keep pushing forward to a world that's accessible for everybody.
We cannot be afraid to make mistakes. Like, that has been keeping us stagnant in this progression for a really long time. And the assumption that you're going to offend somebody, I didn't know much about your background either. And that's how I felt too. And most people with disabilities, I can't speak for everybody, but like, it's part of who we are. We're not looking to fix this thing. It's part of the fabric of the layers of who we are and who we will become as we continue to navigate it, So, those old tired thoughts need to go bye-bye. I can't talk about it. We don't progress. Like, that's not the answer at all.
I think we've kind of, and I had a little bit of this same conversation with Marcy French a few weeks ago. We've kind of shot ourselves in the foot because we have scared people so badly around fair housing and what we can and can't say and what we can and can't do, that in our specific situation with this conversation today, we're not able to learn about people and what they need and what their, situation is, because we're so afraid to step on that landmine. And yet we've got to be able to find some kind of balance between being compliant and having a heart for people and committing to doing the right thing for everyone, regardless of their situation. So it is, I think we've kind of created our own monster in a little way.
Well, and I want to lift up compliance for a minute and laws and ADA and all of the things that protect us. Like, we need those in place because it holds us accountable to do the right thing, 100%. And that's really, 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 really important, especially in the business that we're in, right? It's very important. But we don't stop there. To your point, we need to have open communication. We need to understand that disability is not a check off the box. Every scenario is going to look very different. And we're not going to figure out the right path to navigate that individual moment unless we start to navigate it and stop ignoring it and find the correct path forward for every given situation. And that is going to feel uncomfortable until we start to get a little bit comfortable trying. We try. We don't even try, So, I have been stared at my entire life. People watch from afar and they assume. And it's those assumptions and unknowns about disability that carry through ableism and us thinking that we know how terrible this path is. And we need to start actually communicating. It would solve everything. Communication and education is really key. There needs to be a lot more education on this, a lot more conversation to find that comfort in navigating it.
Well, I remember teaching, leasing workshops, and we had all these customer scenarios. And one of the scenarios that I had was Susan, and Susan was wheelchair bound. And, I would watch people role play through our questioning strategy around how to find out what's important to someone in their new home. And they would struggle just because that card had someone in a wheelchair. And, instead of assuming, we don't know anything about her. We don't know whether it's a permanent state or that she had knee surgery and she won't be in that chair forever, or who knows what her situation is. But asking the same questions that we would ask anybody else. What's important to you in your new apartment home?
That's right.
What are some of the things that you absolutely have to have? And, not making assumptions that someone in a wheelchair doesn't want to be on a third floor.
And not making assumptions that the word bound you just used, that's very common from a wheelchair user perspective.
Oh. Yeah.
And we don't look at it as we're bound to this horrible thing that is limiting. It's more like I have the privilege of using this tool that is going to allow me to be free. So wheelchair users typically don't consider themselves bound to it. It's more like, I'm a wheelchair user and this is my tool to navigate. I am bound to my house if I don't have my wheelchair. I'm bound to my unit. I'm bound to the apartment. So
I am bound to have high online shopping bills if I can't get out of the house.
I would be bound to it. So again, that's another shift in lens,
But even like what just happened with you and me, like you didn't shame me. Hey, you shouldn't.
No, never, never.
I didn't be like, crap, what have I said? You know, it wasn't an offense. And you knew it wasn't an offense because we know one another. But still, we were able to have that conversation. And that's really what it comes down to, is not being afraid to, you know, to go
Totally.
there and learn from one another.
Totally.
And if you get it right the first time, you'll learn and you'll get it right the next time. Right.
Yeah. One of my favorite things that happened to me in multifamily was after I started doing my advocacy business, I'd left multifamily, and I had a vendor friend that worked at another technology company that was creating unit plans. And she called me up and she was like, I really want to figure out a different word for walk-in closet.
Yeah.
And the fact that she took enough time to pick up the phone, call me, have the fortitude and the foresight to think about, okay, wait, maybe we could like find better words. You know, that meant a lot to me. And so, but that comes with communication. And I didn't even have the right answer for her. That I was like, well, it's always walk-in closet. What's the word? I don't know I need to think about this. You know, so communication.
Yep.
Navigating things as a community. You know what I mean? Like, we're all in this together. I do not know every answer. I make mistakes all the time, 100%, and get called out on them as well.
I hear you 100%. And so like, I remember setting this call up talking about, some recommendations that we can make for folks. So leasing teams, think outside the box, think about people just for who they are, not for what their circumstances are. And at that human level, we are all the same, no matter how you look at it, no matter what your situation is. And if you can put that lens on, the lens of humanity, the lens of empathy, being able to, I loved how earlier you said, put my wheels in somebody else's shoes, to be able to empathize and to see it from someone else's perspective. That's really what it comes down to. And if we all were better at that, I think the world would be a lot different.
In all of my time in multifamily, which I've been out of the industry for 4 years, though I'm still speaking. So anybody out there is interested.
We'll make sure everybody knows how to get a hold of you, as well as your podcast. We'll link to that.
Hire people with disabilities.
Yes.
Like, there's a saying in disability advocacy from an employment standpoint: nothing for us without us. And through millennia, people have been making decisions without hiring us, putting us in leadership, spots to have a voice at the table, to help guide you to be the most proficient in the decisions that you're making. So from that like representation standpoint, I only saw 3 people at every conference that I ever went to in the almost 20 years that I worked in multifamily. I only saw 3 other people in wheelchairs. Doesn't mean there wasn't more, but there was few and far between. So we need to be building that representation that our industry is welcome, that we're putting disabled people in marketing and showing that we have space and to belong, really.
Yep. That's what it is. That's what it comes down to, is everyone belongs, All right. Well, our time is coming to a close for this. I know, but you're coming back, because I think we're going to look at something for season 2. But before I let you go, we have a thing here at the multifamily where I ask all of my guests the same question.
Mm-hmm.
We use the word audacious, and here at Multifamily Mind, we define audacious as exceedingly brave, daring, reckless, kind of like an audacious explorer who, no matter what the world says, they're going to go explore whatever it is because it's got to be done, and they've got the passion and drive to do it. So from your perspective, what do you think is the most audacious take in multifamily right now?
Yeah. So a couple of years ago, website technology was mandated under ADA. And this has been like a hot topic in companies.
Yeah.
And
this is the little symbol of the person down in the bottom corner. And when you click on it, it opens up and you can change the coloring and you can change the font.
I mean, that's some of it, but website accessibility goes very deep on the back end and has a lot of use cases for sure. And I remember in my many years, there was always this like argument. That's not our job. That's the vendor's job. They're integrated. The accessibility piece isn't our responsibility. That's whoever else you're working with. And I challenge companies, and I think that we're starting to shift there, to look at the opportunities to make your technology accessible. It innovates new technologies that we would have never had before. And it's an opportunity rather than something that we should be pushing off. That is why we have this series and texting and closed caption and all the things that we all use as consumers, whether we have a disability or not. So instead of trying to navigate, that's their job, I say lead in that and say, we want to do that because it's going to make our company stronger, better, and more profitable.
Love it.
And more accessible.
And more accessible. Yeah. And you're gonna have a talent pool that has been untapped, and
That's
there's
right.
so much talent in that community that it's not even funny. So I'm excited.
Yeah, there is.
Love that take. That's a great audacious take, Alycia. Thank you so much for your time today. I can't wait to see all of your success, and I'm going to keep cheering you on from the sidelines. And I hope we get the opportunity to speak together in person sometime soon. Give my love to Marty and Milo. Ladies and gentlemen, listening audience, this has been Steve Wunsch and Alycia Anderson on the Multifamily Mind, super powered by Sales Mail, the easiest way to send personalized messages through video, text, and CRM. And we sure as heck appreciate you spending time with us today. See you next time, everybody. Cheers.
I love you, Steve.
I love you more. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Multifamily Mind podcast, brought to you by Sales Mail, the easiest way to send personalized video via email, text, and CRM. To learn more, go to salesmail.com. And remember, always be audacious. Until next time, I'm Steve Wunsch. Have a great week.